I want to talk about something that I have been thinking about for a long time, and something that became even clearer to me through years of conversations with students from Japan and South Korea. The topic is education. Specifically, how the education systems in the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea are built differently, how those differences shape the kind of adults each system produces, and what I honestly think about where my own country is heading when it comes to the quality of learning. I will be upfront about something personal before I start. I have not finished my college degree. My school records are, to put it kindly, a mess. I moved schools multiple times growing up, tried several universities, and life kept getting in the way in ways I did not have much control over at the time. So when I talk to students who have completed bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and even doctorates, there is a part of me that still feels the weight of that gap. I am almost 40. That chapter of my life is not closed, but it is complicated. I say this because I think it matters for context. I am not speaking about education from a position of having navigated it smoothly. I am speaking from the perspective of someone who knows firsthand how unforgiving the gaps in a system can be when life does not go according to plan. Let me start with how the Philippine education system is structured, because it has actually changed significantly in recent years, and not everyone is aware of that. When I was growing up, the structure was 6 years of elementary school, followed by 4 years of high school. That meant that a student who studied continuously and without interruption could finish high school at around 15 or 16 years old. Then, depending on the course, college took between 4 and 5 years. So, a Filipino student could theoretically have a bachelor's degree by the age of 20 or 21. On paper, that sounds efficient. In practice, it meant that Filipino graduates were often younger and had fewer years of formal preparation compared to graduates from other countries, which created challenges when competing in the international job market. To address this, the Philippines implemented what is called the K-12 program, which added a senior high school level. So now the structure is 6 years of elementary, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school, followed by college. This brought the Philippine system more in line with international standards, though the transition created its own set of challenges for students, families, and institutions that were not fully prepared for the change. When it comes to higher education, Filipino students aiming for the best opportunities generally try to enter either a top private university or a well-regarded state university. State universities are government-funded, which means tuition is significantly lower or sometimes free, but admission is competitive because many students are applying for limited slots. Private universities can offer scholarships, particularly for students who graduate with honors from high school, which gives driven students a path toward quality education, even without full financial means. The difficulty, and I want to be honest about this, is that the system does not treat failure gently. If you fail a subject in a state university, you may have to wait an entire academic year before that subject is offered again, depending on how many students failed it alongside you. If not enough students failed, the school may simply not open the subject for that cycle, which means you are stuck waiting, unable to progress, unable to graduate on time. Some students in this situation transfer to private universities where subjects are offered more frequently, but that comes with higher tuition. The system punishes mistakes heavily, and when life circumstances interfere, as they so often do in a country where financial instability and family pressure are very real, the consequences can derail an entire educational path. There is also a very specific cultural expectation in the Philippines when it comes to employment after graduation. Most job postings explicitly require a degree that is directly related to the position being applied for. If you want to work in finance or accounting, you need a finance or accounting degree. If you want to work in nursing, you need a nursing degree. The connection between what you studied and what you are hired to do is treated as almost mandatory, which leaves very little room for people who discovered their real interests after already committing to a course, or who had to shift programs due to circumstances outside their control. Now let me tell you about Japan, because this is where things get genuinely interesting. In Japan, the structure is also 6 years of elementary, 3 years of junior high school, and 3 years of senior high school, followed by university. But the philosophy behind how students move through the system, and especially what happens after graduation, is strikingly different from what I just described. One of the most surprising things I learned from my Japanese students is that in Japan, the major you studied in university does not necessarily determine what job you can apply for. A student who studied Japanese literature can apply to work at a technology company. Someone who majored in psychology might end up in the finance department of a large corporation. This is not seen as unusual or problematic. It is actually quite normal. The expectation is that companies will train new employees from the ground up when they are hired. The university degree signals that you completed a level of education and can commit to something over time. What you specifically studied is often considered secondary. This approach has a very different effect on the relationship between employees and their companies. In Japan, many workers spend their entire careers within one organization. Companies invest heavily in training their staff and then move them through different departments over the years. Someone might spend their first 2 years in human resources, then be transferred to marketing, then to operations. The idea is to develop employees who understand how the whole organization functions, rather than specialists who only know one narrow area. This system has its advantages, particularly in terms of loyalty and institutional knowledge. But it also means that deep specialization can be harder to develop, and employees do not always have control over which direction their career takes. South Korea is where things become the most intense, and I do not use that word lightly. South Korean students face one of the most competitive academic environments in the world. The pressure begins early, far earlier than most people outside of Korea realize. There are entrance exams for admission to top elementary schools. There are exams for top junior high schools. By the time students are in high school, the entire system is essentially oriented around one single goal, which is performing well enough on the National University Entrance Exam, called the Sunyoung, to gain admission to a prestigious university. This exam is such a defining moment that on the day it is administered, flights in South Korea are rerouted to reduce noise near testing centers. The entire country treats it as a national event. The reason this pressure exists is directly connected to how the South Korean job market works. Graduating from a top-tier university in South Korea is not just an advantage. In many industries, it is effectively a prerequisite. Companies actively recruit from specific universities, and graduating from outside those institutions can make it significantly harder to access certain career paths, regardless of your individual skills or performance. This creates enormous pressure on students and their families, and it starts years before the actual university entrance exam. I learned something from a Korean student that I found genuinely striking. She explained that because it is so difficult to get into the best high schools, students with lower grades sometimes end up concentrated together in the same lower-ranked schools. I had watched a drama about high school bullying in Korea, where the school environment seemed almost unbelievably chaotic, and when I mentioned this to her, she told me that the premise was actually not far from reality in some cases. When students who struggled academically are funneled into the same institution, the social dynamics and behavioral challenges that result can be very difficult to manage. But here's something I found equally interesting about South Korea's system. Once a student gets into a university, the intensity does not necessarily continue at the same level inside the institution. The hardest part for many Korean students is getting in, not staying in, or excelling once they are there. There is a sense among some students that the battle is largely won once university admission is secured, which leads to a shift in effort that can be quite dramatic. The years of extreme pressure before university are followed, for some, by a more relaxed approach to the university experience itself. And then there is the overqualification issue, which is a real and documented problem in South Korea. The job market is competitive enough that many young Koreans pursue master's degrees, or even doctoral degrees not because their desired jobs require that level of education, but because they need something to distinguish themselves from the thousands of other applicants who already have bachelor's degrees. The result is a workforce where people are technically overqualified for the positions available to them, which creates frustration, underemployment, and a significant mismatch between what the education system is producing and what the economy actually needs. Coming back to the Philippines, I want to say something honestly about where I think things are heading because I care about this enough to be direct even if it is uncomfortable to hear. I've spoken with people who work in Philippine public schools, and what they describe concerns me. There is increasing pressure on teachers not to fail students, regardless of whether those students have actually mastered the material. Parents complain when their children receive failing grades. School administrations sometimes prioritize promotion rates over learning outcomes. The result is that students advance through grade levels without genuinely acquiring the knowledge and skills those levels are supposed to represent. This is not the fault of individual teachers, most of whom are dedicated and doing their best under difficult conditions. It is a systemic problem rooted in how success is being measured and what pressures those measurements create. When a school is evaluated on how many students pass rather than on how much students actually learn, the incentives point in the wrong direction. I also think about access to information and how that plays into this. Young people today have smartphones. They have the internet. They have access to more information than any generation before them. And yet, the ability to think critically about that information, to evaluate sources, to distinguish between what is true and what is not, seems to be getting harder rather than easier for many people. Exposure to more content does not automatically produce deeper thinking. Without the foundation of a strong education that teaches how to think rather than just what to think, more access can actually lead to more confusion and more manipulation. Education is not just about getting a job or a degree. It is about developing the capacity to navigate a complicated world with some level of intelligence and integrity. Every country is working on this in its own way, with its own strengths and its own serious gaps. Japan is trying to produce adaptable employees while sometimes sacrificing individual expression. South Korea is producing academically driven achievers while creating levels of stress that are genuinely damaging to young people's mental health. The Philippines is trying to expand access to education while struggling to maintain quality and consistency. None of these systems are perfect. All of them are trying to solve real problems in contexts shaped by history, culture, economics, and politics. And all of them could learn something from looking honestly at what the others are doing well. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, subscribe to help me hit my 2,000 video goal. This is my unfiltered diary of solo living in the Philippines, from the tough days in the ESL classroom to my journey learning Japanese and Korean. Yes, I am still a beginner. If you would like to support my work and my retirement fund, check out the Buy a Treat for My Pets link in the description. Make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next update. Thanks for being part of the journey. See you then.